My daughter came in through the back door that October evening and set her backpack down on the kitchen mat the way she always did, careful about the mud on her boots, and she said, calm as if she were telling me what was for supper, that something had walked her home from the bus stop. She said it was very tall. She said it walked right beside her the whole half-mile of gravel road, and that it left when she reached the gate. She was 8 years old. She was not frightened. That was the part I could not explain then and cannot explain now. I have carried that account for 28 years. I told one person, my wife Ruth, and she said she had always believed it. Ruth died in 2020, and 2 years after that, my daughter, grown now with her own children, sat down across from me at this same kitchen table and asked me to say the thing I had never been willing to say out loud. So, I am saying it, not because I expect anyone to believe me, because I am 71 years old and I have gotten to the age where the things you refuse to put into words start to feel heavier than the things you carry in the open. To understand what that evening meant, I need to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the story, exactly. The beginning of the drawings. My name is Travis Thornton. I spent 31 years as a rural mail carrier in the foothills east of the Cascades in Washington state. I started that route when I was 21, driving a right-hand drive Jeep DJ, 5 on 12 miles of gravel and secondary pavement, and I drove variations of that same route until I retired. The country I worked was not wilderness in the dramatic sense. It was second-growth timber interspersed with small acreages, horse properties, the odd working cattle operation, the kind of landscape where the trees came right to the edge of the cleared land and stood there. Most mornings the road was empty. Most mornings the only sound was the Jeep's engine and the creak of the mail tray and, in winter, the sound of the wipers on a frosted windshield. I knew that country the way you know a thing you've watched from close range for 17 years. I knew which drainages flooded in November, which side roads went to mud in March, which property owners left their dogs loose. I was not a man who startled easily, and I was not a man who invented things. I want to be plain about what I was. I was a man who got up at 4:30 in the morning, sorted mail in a building that smelled of ink and damp cardboard, drove 12 miles of route in all weather, came home, and did it again. I am not a mystical person. I am not a person who looks for meaning in things that have a straightforward explanation. My wife Ruth used to say that I would need a thing to knock me sideways twice before I admitted it was real, and she was not wrong about that. We had Lily in the spring of 1987. She was a quiet child, watchful, the kind of kid who sat at the table with paper and crayons for long stretches while Ruth and I talked over supper. That part was ordinary. What was not ordinary was the figure she kept drawing. She started sometime in the spring of 1991. She was 4 years old. The drawings were the way a 4-year-old draws. Large, simple shapes, no necks to speak of, the proportions of things determined by what mattered to the child doing the drawing. What she kept making was a tall, dark shape, always on one side of the page, with a smaller shape nearby. Sometimes the smaller shape had a ponytail, sometimes it had a lunchbox. The tall shape was always the same, always to the left of the small figure, always roughly twice the height of the page itself if you were to extend it. She used the dark brown crayon, and sometimes the black one, and on a few occasions a dark green she had to press hard to see. I noticed them the way you notice things your child does. I put them on the refrigerator the way you put things on the refrigerator. Ruth noticed them more carefully than I did. She started keeping a few of them, setting them aside in a kitchen drawer rather than letting them go through the paper recycling with the newspaper. I asked Lily once, in the summer of that year, what the tall figure was. She said it was her friend. I asked where her friend lived. She pointed at the window that faced the tree line at the back of the property, the Douglas fir and cedar that started about 60 yards behind the garden fence. I said, "The trees?" She said, "Yes, in there." I did not pursue it. A 4-year-old with an imaginary friend in the woods was not something I had any framework to worry about. The drawings continued through 1992 and into 1993. Ruth counted them once. She had saved 41 sheets by the time Lily was 6. The proportions of the tall figure were not consistent in the way a child just repeating a shape from memory would make them consistent. The figure was sometimes broader across the shoulder. Sometimes the arms were longer. Once, on a piece of construction paper Ruth had given her for a school project. Lily drew the tall shape with one arm extended toward the small figure, and the small figure's hand touching the end of it. Ruth showed me that one specifically. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I think she's seen something, Travis." I told her it was a kid's drawing. Ruth put it back in the drawer and did not argue. I want to pause here and say that I am not a person who withheld out of cruelty. I genuinely believed what I was telling her. I believed it because believing otherwise was not something I had room for, not inside the life I was living, not inside what I understood the world to be. I want to be honest about that. Lily started taking the school bus in the fall of 1992. The stop was at the end of our road, where the gravel met the county highway, a half-mile from the house. We had a blue-tick hound named Boone, 4 years old that fall, big-ribbed and mild-natured, and Ruth would sometimes send Boone up the road to meet the bus if she was busy inside. Boone had his own ideas about this arrangement. Some days he went up the road and waited. Other days, he stayed on the porch. He was never a dog you could fully instruct. What I remember about those years is the routine of them. The 4:30 alarm, the route, the return, the supper. The sound of Lily doing her schoolwork at the table. Boone on the mat by the wood stove. Ruth reading or sewing or doing the accounts for the small business she kept from home. Refinishing furniture she bought at estate sales. Those were good years. I do not have a better word for them. They were ordinary and they were mine, and I was not paying close enough attention to what was happening at the edge of them. October of 1995. I was 38 years old. I had been on that route for 17 years. The weather in the foothills that month was the kind that comes in off the Pacific and sits on the ground. Not heavy rain, but persistent wet, the kind that soaks through wool and turns the road shoulders soft. I remember the specific afternoon because I was late. A box of parcel packages had been added to my run without enough notice, and I had 3 addresses I hadn't been to before. Properties set back from the road with unmarked gates. I ended up running 40 minutes behind my normal return time. Ruth had a delivery pickup that afternoon, a dresser she had sold to a woman in town, and she had arranged for Lily to ride the bus home and walk the half-mile herself. Lily had done it a handful of times before. The road was quiet. The distance was not unreasonable. She was 8 years old and she knew every inch of that gravel. I got home at 20 minutes past 4. Ruth's truck was still out, the house was unlocked, Boone was not on the porch. I went in and found Lily sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of milk and her homework open in front of her. She looked up at me and said, "You're late." I said I was sorry, and I started to ask how the walk was. She said, "It was fine." She said, "Someone walked with me." I sat down. I asked her who. She said it was the tall one, the one from the trees. I will tell you what I felt, because I think it is important to name it. I felt the floor shift, not in a dramatic way, in the way of a man who has been standing on something he believed was solid and registered, just for a moment, that it was not. I asked her to tell me about it. She said the bus let her off at the stop, and she started walking. She said she had gone maybe 100 yards when she became aware of something moving in the trees at the west side of the road, keeping pace with her. She said it was not hurrying. She said it was just there, moving with her, inside the tree line where the second growth fir and alder started. She said she could see it through the gaps in the brush, dark, very large and tall, taller than any person she had seen. She said she was not scared. I asked her why not. She thought about it for a moment, the way children do when they are deciding whether to say the true thing. She said because it was careful. She said the way it moved was careful, like it was trying not to startle her. She said it stayed in the trees the whole length of the road. She said it stepped out slightly when she got to the gate, just enough that she could see it plainly, and she stopped and looked at it. She said they looked at each other for a moment, and then it turned back into the trees and was gone. I asked her what it looked like. She said it was very tall and very dark, covered in something that was not clothes. She said its face looked like it was thinking about something. I have thought about that particular phrase for 28 years. Its face looked like it was thinking about something. An 8-year-old's description. I cannot improve on it. Then she picked up her pencil and went back to her homework. I went outside. Boone was at the fence line, the one along the property's western edge, where the garden met the untended strip before the tree line. He was sitting down, which is not how a blue-tick hound typically presents himself, at a border between the known yard and the dark tree cover behind it. He was not raising his hackles. He was not barking or whining. He was sitting with his ears forward and his body still, looking into the trees. He looked the way a dog looks when it has made a decision about something and is done deciding. I walked the fence line and then walked out to the road. The soft shoulder on the west side, where the drainage ditch ran shallow before the tree line started, was the colour and consistency of wet clay that month, the kind of ground that holds an impression. I found one depression in it about 70 yards from our gate, set back from the edge of the road by about 2 feet. I knelt down and put my foot beside it. I wear a size 11 boot. The depression was longer than my foot by a significant amount, perhaps a third again as long, and it was deep, pressed into the clay as if something heavy had shifted its weight there. The margins of it were not sharp, the way a footprint is not sharp when the ground is very soft. I could not say with any certainty that it was a footprint. What I could say was that nothing in my 17 years of driving that road had left a mark like that, and I had been watching that ground for 17 years. I stood there in the wet cold for a while. I tried to work out what I was looking at. I tried to tell myself it was an elk. There were elk in those drainages, and a large bull can make an impression in soft ground. An elk's hoofprint is roughly oval and split, and this impression was neither. I tried to tell myself it was 2 impressions overlapping, which can happen in soft clay when an animal circles back. I could not make the shape fit that. I tried to tell myself that Lily had made it up, that she had heard something in the trees, and her imagination had done the rest. Then I thought about the 41 drawings in Ruth's kitchen drawer, started when Lily was 4 years old, and I could not make that fit either. I went back inside. I checked the gate. The gate latch was undisturbed, and the wire above it was not bent or pushed. Nothing had come through the gate. Whatever had been walking along that road had stayed on the roadside of the fence the entire way. Ruth got home at 6. I waited until Lily was in bed, and then I sat down at the kitchen table and told Ruth what Lily had said and what I had found in the road shoulder. Ruth was quiet for a moment. She got up and went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a handful of Lily's drawings and put them on the table in front of me. She spread them out, the dark figure, always to the left of the small shape with the ponytail, always at the edge of the page, always facing the same direction. She said, "I told you she'd seen something. I looked at those drawings for a long time. The figure in them was consistent in a way that bothered me more than anything else. Not consistent like a symbol a child learns and repeats, a house shape, a sun shape. Consistent like a thing a child has observed. I said I did not know what to make of it. Ruth said she did not need me to make anything of it. She just wanted me to stop trying to unmake it. That was the end of the conversation, and in a way, it was the end of my resistance. I did not say another word about it that night, or for a long time after. But I stopped explaining it. I stopped running through the inventory of possible animals and optical effects and childhood imagination. I folded the account up and put it in a place where I kept things I could not resolve, and I went back to my route the next morning. What changed after that was small and behavioral. On afternoons when I was running late, I called Ruth from the post office before I left, so she knew to arrange something for Lily, a neighbour's car, a later bus. Not because I thought the road was dangerous, because of the lateness, because that half-mile of gravel in the dusk was not a thing I was willing to leave to chance again, and the reason I was not willing had nothing to do with danger, and everything to do with the fact that something had chosen to be careful with my daughter when I had not been careful enough. That distinction mattered to me. It still does. Boone was never the same at that fence line after that evening. He went to it regularly, 2 or 3 times a week, and sat down in the same way he had sat that night, facing the tree line, calm and attentive, not anxious, not warning, attending. The way a dog attends to something it has already decided is not a threat. He did that until he was old and his back legs gave out, and even in those last months he would sometimes stand at the fence facing that direction and hold still for a minute or two before turning back to the house. I noticed it every time. Ruth never talked about it to anyone else, to my knowledge. She was a woman who understood that some accounts belong to the people who carry them, and she carried this one without complaint. What she did do over the years was keep those drawings. She kept all 41 of the ones she had saved in a folder in the filing cabinet in the back bedroom, where she kept her furniture receipts and her grandfather's land documents. She did not display them. She did not show them to anyone. She just kept them. In the last year of her life, after she came home from the hospital the second time and it was clear that the cancer was not something she was going to come back from, she asked me to get the folder. I brought it to her in the bedroom, and she went through the drawings slowly, one at a time. She said, "I always thought she was trying to tell us something, and we weren't quite listening." I said I thought she was right about that. Ruth said she wasn't afraid, though. That was the important part. Whatever it was, it didn't want her to be afraid. I told her I believed that was true. Ruth put the drawings back in the folder and handed it to me and said, "Keep these." She died in February of 2020. She was 63 years old. The cancer had been there for 2 years before we knew it, and it moved fast once it made itself known. The morning after the funeral, I went and sat at the kitchen table alone, which is the kitchen table I am still sitting at, and I thought about everything I had not said to her that I should have said, and one of the things I thought about was the fact that she had spent 25 years believing something that I had never fully said out loud to anyone, never confirmed for her in plain language, and she had done it without needing me to. She had been right, and she had waited for me, and she had been patient about both. I have not been able to fully square that debt. Lily called me 2 years after that, in the fall of 2022. She was 35 years old. She had children of her own, a house in eastern Washington, a life I was proud of without having had much to do with it. She said she had been thinking about something and she wanted to talk about it. She asked if she could come for a weekend. I said yes. She arrived on a Friday evening and we sat up late talking about ordinary things, her children, the property, what I had been doing with the woodlot since I retired. Saturday morning we had coffee and she asked me, without preamble, what I had found in the road shoulder that October evening in 1995. I looked at her. She said, "I know you went out and looked. You always went and looked. And I always wondered what you found." I told her. I described the depression in the clay, the size of it against my boot, the fact that it was the only one and that the fence gate was undisturbed. She sat with that for a while. Then she told me her version of the walk. She said it had been raining lightly when she got off the bus, the kind of October rain that hangs in the air more than falls. She said she was thinking about her homework, and she was not paying much attention to the road. She said she became aware of the movement in the trees gradually, not as a single moment of noticing, but as a slow accumulation, the way you become aware of a sound that has been going on longer than you registered it. She said the trees on that stretch were alders mostly, deciduous, already half bare in October, so the light came through in patches and the ground cover under them was low. She could see into them for about 20 or 30 feet. She said the figure was moving at her pace, inside the tree line, and she could see it through the gaps in the alders. She said it was dark-coloured against the grey October light. She said it was large enough that she could track it above the level of the undergrowth without difficulty, which meant it was not low to the ground and not the proportions of anything she recognised as a known animal. She said it moved in a way that was unhurried and specific, a word she used deliberately, she told me, because unhurried alone was not enough. She said it was moving with intention. It was moving alongside her with intention. She said she remembered not being afraid, and that she had thought about that many times since, because she had been afraid of other things at that age, loud noises, the steep stairs at her grandmother's house, certain dogs on the route. She said whatever she felt during that walk was the opposite of those things. She said it was more like being accompanied. She said when she reached the gate, she stopped, and it stepped out slightly from the trees. She said she saw it full, or nearly full, for just a moment. She said it was very tall, taller than the fence post behind her that she had always used as a scale reference when she was a child, and the fence post was 8 feet. She said it was broad across the shoulders, dark in colour, and that it turned its head and looked at her directly before it turned back into the trees. She said the last thing she noticed was Boone, sitting at the fence with his tail moving slowly across the ground, not wagging hard the way he greeted her after school on normal days, but moving in a slow, deliberate way, like he was acknowledging something. I did not say anything for a while after she told me that. Lily wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and looked at the window. Outside the garden fence, the Douglas fir started where it has always started, dark green and present. She said, "I drew it for 4 years before that walk, you know." I said I knew. She said, "I used to wonder if that meant something, if it had been there before and I had already known it somehow, and the walk was just the time I finally saw it clearly." I told her I had wondered the same thing. I told her that her mother had wondered the same thing for 25 years, and that Ruth had believed it without needing me to confirm it, and that I was sorry I had taken so long to be the kind of man who could say it plainly. Lily looked at me the way her mother used to look at me when I had finally arrived somewhere she had been waiting. She said, "You're saying it now. That's enough." She went home Sunday evening, and before she got in her truck, she said, "You should tell it. Not to anyone particular. Just say it somewhere. For Mom." She held my hand for a moment at the driver's side door, and then she drove down the gravel road and turned at the county highway and was gone. So here is what I know, and here is what I will not claim to know. I know that my daughter began drawing a tall, dark figure at the age of 4, consistently over 4 years, before she could have had the vocabulary or the reference to construct it from something she read or saw. I know that she walked half a mile of gravel road in October 1995 and arrived home calm and unharmed on a day I was late and could not be there. I know she told me, without drama and without hesitation, that something large had walked beside her from the bus stop to the gate, staying inside the tree line, and had left when she reached our property. I know that Boone met her at the fence line and sat down quietly, which was not a thing that Dog did when he was troubled. I know that I found one depression in the soft clay of the road shoulder, too large for any animal on that road whose tracks I recognized, pressed into the ground with the weight of something heavy and gone by the time I got there. I know that Ruth kept those drawings for 25 years without being asked to, and that in the last weeks of her life she said, whatever it was, it didn't want her to be afraid. What I will not claim to know is what it was. I have heard the word people use. I have seen the television programs. I want no part of that framing, because that framing turns it into something sensational, and what happened on that road was not sensational. What happened was that a child was alone on a quarter-mile of wet gravel in the October dusk, and something chose to walk beside her, carefully, without alarming her, without coming through the fence, without asking for anything in return. And then it was gone. That is not a sensation. That is a kindness. I was 38 years old and I was late getting home, and my daughter was alone on that road because of me. That is a thing I have carried alongside the account itself for 28 years. The particular weight of the afternoon I was not where I was supposed to be. I do not know that the figure on that road had any awareness of my failure. I do not know that it saw a child alone and made a decision the way a person makes a decision. I cannot enter its understanding, and I would not pretend to. What I can say is that the result of whatever it did or did not decide was that my daughter walked that half mile and came home whole, and sat down at the kitchen table with her homework, and was not afraid. Ruth said once, late in her illness, that she thought the world was older than the part of it we lived in, and that the older parts of it operated by rules she did not have the education to name. She was not a mystical person either. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said things that she had thought through and decided were simply true. She said she thought that whatever Lily had seen was something that had been in those hills for longer than the mail route had been there, longer than the property, longer than the county road, and that it had its own understanding of who belonged in that country and who needed looking after. I cannot verify that. I cannot verify any of the explanations, including the rational ones. What I can verify is the account, the dates, the distance, the drawings, the dog, and the depression in the clay. Everything else is inference. I am 71 years old. I have been retired for 3 years. I still live on this property, the same gravel road, the same tree line at the back of the garden fence. I still have those drawings, 41 sheets in a folder in the back bedroom where Ruth kept them. Some of them are faded. The dark brown crayon has gone pale in places, but the figure is still there in every one, on the left side of the page, at the edge of the drawing, facing the same direction. Boone has been gone a long time. We buried him at the edge of the property, near the fence line he favoured. But I still find myself looking in that direction when I am out in the morning. The way you look toward a place where something important happened even after the evidence of it is gone. The tree line is still there, dark green in all seasons, beginning exactly where the cleared land ends. I do not go into those trees. I never have. Not because I am afraid of them, but because I have understood for a long time that I am a person who belongs on this side of the fence. And whatever is in those trees belongs to that side, and that division has always been respected from both directions. If you have ever stood at the edge of a tree line in the late afternoon and felt, not fear, but the particular sensation of being regarded from somewhere deeper in than you can see. I am not going to tell you what that was. I am not going to tell you what to call it. What I will tell you is this. There is an old man at a kitchen table who carried a thing for 28 years and is putting it down now, not because he is sure of what it means, but because it is a true account and it deserves to exist in the open air, where the right person can hear it and carry it forward. Ruth would have liked that. She waited 25 years for me to get there. The drawings are in the back bedroom if you need something to hold on to. And outside, past the garden fence, the fir trees start where they have always started, patient and dark, and older than anything I can put a name to. I go out there most mornings now, just to the fence. I stand there for a minute. Sometimes Boone comes with me in the way he always did, somewhere at the edge of memory where the good dogs go when they're done. The trees don't move unless the wind moves them. But I look anyway. I have always looked. And once, a long time ago, something in there was looking back. If that is a story you needed to hear, the next one is on the screen.